All right, so we're back and we're here to continue our conversation about patrol. So last time, when we were talking, right, we were talking a little bit about just patrol in general. In this sense, for the purposes of this conversation, right, really how the random, allocation of officers, because they're visually present, because there is an uncertainty about if and when someone get caught, and because it'll be quick, and for some people, actually getting caught is a severe punishment, will lead to a crime prevention kind of thing, right? And this used to be like the prevailing thought for some time, right? So this was something that was believed to work, and that was really sort of like a big impetus and drive for all kinds of things, right? So this led, to a big call for more cars, radio equipment, and alternatively, also like more officers, right? Because if we have more resources established like that, in these areas, right, then we should be able to prevent more crime. So this is something that is better for us in terms of a crime prevention strategy, right? So the thing is, though, funny little thing about random kind of stuff, right, is that if we pick something that's random, right, and we let's, if we had like our city grid again, no city actually probably looks like this, although maybe some do, right? And we were allocating patrols, right? So if we to think about our map from last time where we're patrolling and we're just sort of like moving around, and this is one car's route. And we had another, maybe it just comes up here and it goes around here and we're driving and we go back this way, right? And maybe, we have another that's just here, like all the time, right? For this, we sort of have this convoluted mess, and we know that officers are coming around and, they're going about through their day. And maybe, it changes from officer to officer. Maybe it changes per shift. Per day of the week, perhaps time of the year could play an influence, right? But you have like this coverage, right? And maybe this coverage, is, decent in the sense that we are, all around the city, right? So maybe coverage is decent. We have, officers are directed to certain areas, or excuse me, not directed, but, they're at, certain places. We have visibility. And we, like, in this illustration anyway, we have like pretty good coverage, right? The problem is that when you have something that is random or treated as random, right, what you're essentially saying is that there is no rhyme or reason to what you're doing, right? So there is no, it's just like, a naturally occurring phenomenon that kind of happens, and whatever happens, happens, right? And, in some ways that makes sense, right? Because if we think about, crime as a behavior, in theory, this could happen anywhere, right? Like it could happen, at your local corner store. It could happen in your apartment or home or anywhere else, right? Like there are in some ways, limitless opportunities to commit crime, right? So if we send them everywhere, then, surely we'll end up preventing crime, right? And that was the prevailing logic for some time as to like how we should allocate officers and why they should be good. Excuse me, taking some, but why that should or should not, work for us as a crime control policy, right? But, there's always a but, right? You will recall from social disorganization theory, which we won't go into the exact patterns, right, of social disorganization theory, but social disorganization theory from Sean McKay suggests crime is concentrated in certain parts of a city, right? Namely in areas where, the social disorganization exists, and this is, areas where common goals can't be realized. And because they can't be realized, this leads to, a weakened informal social control network, and leads to weak informal social control, which gives us more crime. And so what they're saying is that in these areas, when they initially did their study, right, they were looking at the city of Chicago. And Chicago, it does not look like what I'm about to show you, right, for some, but let's say, like, here's a lake, and Chicago comes down here, and it comes out here, right. Or now it looks like California, a worse California. But what they were doing is that they looked at juvenile delinquency records over several years, and found that there would be areas that were concentrated where, like, more juvenile crime seemed to happen than other places. Did the map actually look like this? No, I'm just like drawing stuff, right? So in this, right, what this tells us then is that there is perhaps, if you have a concentration, and this concentration, happens over time, with, there's going to be some variance for sure, but with regularity, over time, over space, everything else, this would suggest a pattern, right? So, if this is something that was known beforehand, right, eventually what ended up happening is that there became a study of officers, right? So if we know that crime is patterned and that they are located in certain places, then does it make sense? One, is this something that can be replicated, right? So first is like, is it true? If it was true in Chicago in the 1920s, is this true in, like 1980s, right? Eventually what we end up finding, right, is that we have our new, arbitrary city that is, I don't know, it looks like something like that, right? And it looks like a guy with his tongue sticking out. So, or it was a big nose, and maybe a little ear. So now we have like a little ear, and a little nostril, and little specks on the tongue, right? So in the city, right, we have seen that these orange spots are what, right? Maybe he's got like, he's got like an eye here, right? Something like that. And for our illustrative purposes, what does this tells us, right? We'll assume that these features are actually, what these actually are, like orifices into the body, right? That's what we're going to call it. So when we find like these orifices, these are areas where crime is getting into the system of a city, right? Where it happens more and often. These places are more at risk, and we see them all the time, right? So what does this tell us then, right? So if this is something that can be done, what can we do to prevent it, right? If we use this example of orifices, right, maybe we get some, headphones that are coming on, right, that we would do that. We could possibly get, some pool shades on to protect our eyes. And maybe, depending on what you guys are seeing this over here, right, we can have a face covering. Go around to cover this all up, right? So what this ends up telling us then is that from this particular example, right, if we deploy a preventative measure to certain areas, could maybe prevent harm. And so with this particular instance then, how does this apply to policing then? Is that if we direct patrol to certain areas of a city, or, whatever our patrol area is. We can lead to maybe less crime. How is this different, right? So the big key difference that we'll have here, how this is from random control, is that one, right, this requires a study of existing patterns or existing crimes, right? So it's a very deliberate effort to find, what exactly is going on. So this is a studied approach, right? It's identifying a pattern and then coordinating the response to these specific areas or problem areas, right? In this case, then, our term of art for this then is hotspots policing. Why hotspots policing? Probably because if you did it in early mapping areas, those spots were red, so it's easier to call them hotspots, and it seems like a big problem, right? That's probably why. I don't actually know why they picked the name hotspots, but that's what they call it. So with hotspots policing, then we do exactly what we already discussed, right? Is that this ends up becoming focused on place. In crime, right? So much like social disorganization theory, where we identify patterns before, hotspots policing does that for each unique city, right? Because the landscape and the geography is going to be different, as well as the communities that are there, as well as history of doing crime and policing and things like that, right? So there's this growing focus on place and crime, right? So what we try to figure out, right, is now depending on what it is, right, it depends on the issue. This could be politically driven, this could be socially driven, it could be driven by any kind of number of things, right? But in many cases, right, maybe we're concerned about violent kind of crimes. So if we are concerned about getting robberies down or murders, maybe this could be, open air drug markets. I did a project once for identity theft and credit card fraud kind of stuff. So, the list is legion. You have to identify what these points are, right? But once that's put into place, right? Oh yeah, I published that paper. I forgot about it. It's been a long time. Yeah. So if we have this going in place where we find identity theft and credit card fraud and other spots that are, tend to be, hazardous or more likely to invite crime, then it suggests, right, that we can obtain other information. What do I mean by that? So if you think about knowing where certain crimes occur, right? It's one thing to know where crimes are occurring, but you can have this more nuanced kind of data, right? So what added nuance, right? So if we think about, time of day, so we'll say this is 0, 12, and then, I guess, what are we going to put? We're just going to put 2300, right? And this was Monday, and this is Tuesday, and this is Wednesday, and this is Thursday. And we did the same thing, right? Where we have 12, or 0, 12, 23, 0, 12, 23, 0, 12, 23. This is very crude, so don't at me, right? And this is number of crimes. So if we, between each day then, right, what we could end up identifying then is that maybe there's, for whatever that crime is, right, maybe it's pretty low, but then it spikes at lunch and, and then it kind of peels off and goes back in. And then on Tuesdays, it's just high all day and it's low, and then it tapers off. So maybe it spikes at lunch on Wednesday and spikes again in the middle of the night. And then people are cooling off on Thursday, right, or something like that. If this pattern is repeated and repeated at times, right, this gives us additional information to make an informed decision, right? So by breaking down crime type, the time of day, as well as day of the week, we have a much better picture of what is happening with our criminal activity of interest, right? Now it could be multiple, right, and maybe they are related in some way, and that is an important conversation to have. But in this particular case, then this is what we're trying to figure out, is to have this wider array of information at our disposal. With this, then, so if we have this nuanced point, what do we end up doing? In this case, then, we would deploy officers at those days and times of interest to think about the original role of patrol and policing in general, to prevent crime from happening in the first place. Because that is ultimately what we want police to do, is to prevent something before it even happens, right? So this is what hotspots policing is in general, right? That's the general core concept. And so the next one we'll start unpacking